The paper bag rested quietly on his lap, trembling slightly with the steady rhythm of a man who had long grown used to silence. Around him, the late afternoon park bathed in a soft golden hue, but in his eyes, everything seemed coated in a haze of contemplation. The sun peeked through the limbs of an old oak, scattering light across the worn-out bench. A gentle breeze swept through, nudging his frayed baseball cap askew. He didn't bother adjusting it. His eyes remained fixed on the small object in his hand, a thin white envelope, crinkled at the edges, nameless, unmarked, with nothing but the faint scent of sweat and fried grease. Thomas Hale's fingers closed gently around it. He had only come here to check on the first branch of Fire Grill, the fast food chain he had poured his entire life into building. Another undercover visit, like so many before, to see the truth without being seen. But today, things had taken a turn he hadn't expected. Inside the paper bag burger, fries, standard combo from the drive-through window, sat this envelope, still as if it had been waiting for him. Inside, not quite $500, all in ones, fives, and a few loose coins. But it wasn't the money that caught his breath. It was a scrap of paper, handwritten in messy, uneven letters, for Milo. "Don't tell the manager. Thank you." He leaned back, pressing into the bench. The sounds of the park children laughing, bike tires over gravel, vendors calling out for ice cream faded away. Only his heartbeat remained, and old memories. Once again, he saw Michael's eyes, his little brother bright with that familiar mix of hope and desperation from the hospital bed years ago. That pleading gaze, the one that begged him to stay, even as the doctors had already given up. Back then, Thomas, a sophomore in business school, had dropped everything, worked every job he could find, night and day, and still failed to gather enough for the treatment insurance had denied. He held the envelope gently, as if it might shatter like a dream. He didn't know who Milo was, didn't know what kind of child, whose child, from which family at the restaurant. But he knew one thing for sure: someone had risked their job to secretly place this envelope inside his meal. A clear violation of policy, grounds for termination, penalties, being blacklisted from the system. And yet, they had done it. For a child named Milo. His eyes returned to the paper bag. Fire Grill's logo still printed brightly, flames curling around a burger bun. It had once been the symbol of a dream to bring good food to all walks of life at an affordable price. But now, the symbol blurred in his vision, because beneath it loomed an unavoidable question: if a sick child couldn't be helped by the very system he had built, what meaning did that dream truly hold? Thomas rose to his feet. He took off the old cap, peeled off the fake beard, and tossed them onto the passenger seat of his car. No more Rick the delivery driver. Now, he was simply Thomas Hale, CEO, and the only person with the power to change everything. Not just to help Milo, but to fulfill the promise he had made long ago to his late brother. If I ever gain power, I'll use it to make sure no one loses a loved one the way we did. He turned the car around, eyes sharp beneath the fading sun. He didn't know what awaited him: resistance, deceit, or silent sacrifice. But he knew this much. It was time to pull back the curtain and step into the truth. Thomas parked behind Fire Grill branch number 1, the one he had opened using his very first loan. A small, 2-story building nestled in an aging neighborhood on Chicago's west side. Once his pride and joy when it opened in 1998. Today, it mirrored the recent quarterly reports, chipped paint on the walls, half-lit signage, trash bins overflowing onto the sidewalk. He didn't need to go inside to know this place, once a symbol of ambition, was rotting from within, without waiting for anyone to unlock it. Thomas shoved open the back door and stepped into the kitchen hallway. The stench of old oil greeted him, layered with the hiss of fryers and scattered muttering. A few workers passed him, unaware, until he walked straight toward the office marked "Managers and Supervisors Only." Inside, Garrison, the regional manager, was reclined in a swivel chair, feet up on the desk, scrolling on his phone, chewing gum, his eyes dull, suit jacket half-buttoned, tie wrinkled like it had just come out of a glove box. He looked up and froze. "Miss..." The word stumbled out in disbelief. "Call every kitchen and shift worker into the break room. Now, not a minute late," Thomas said, voice calm but unyielding. "Sir, it's the lunch rush, I'm afraid. And I just saw 3 customers waiting over 20 minutes without food." Thomas cut in. "If this is the 100% efficiency you've been reporting, I need to redefine the term in our system." Garrison swallowed hard, nodding quickly as he pulled out his phone to make the calls. 11 minutes later, the cramped break room at the end of the hall was packed wall to wall, a scratched-up table, an empty water cooler, a humming, outdated fridge. No one sat. Everyone stood against the walls, backs straight, eyes locked on the man they never expected to see. Thomas stepped in. No suit, no badge, but one look at him, and they knew this was the man who had founded Fire Grill, the name they wore daily. He placed the paper bag on the table. Slowly, he opened it, pulled out the white envelope, laid it flat like evidence in a trial. Around him, eyes widened in fear. Garrison shrank by the door, sweat trickling down his brow. "Can anyone tell me who Milo is?" Thomas asked, voice low, like a wind sweeping through old vents. Silence. Not just fear, uncertainty, shame, doubt. An older man with salt and pepper hair stepped forward. "Sir, it's probably just a misunderstanding. Someone made a mistake." "No." A young woman's voice interrupted, clear, steady. A slim girl in a Fire Grill kitchen uniform stepped out from the group. Her name, stitched on her shirt, Riley. "We did it. It wasn't a mistake." She took a step forward, holding Thomas's gaze. "And Milo is the son of Hugo, the man who washes dishes here on the night shift." A soft exhale rippled through the group. Eyes lowered, shoulders tensed, as if someone had finally voiced the secret too heavy to carry. Thomas nodded. "Good. I want to hear more. The whole truth." Garrison started to interject. "Sir, if I may explain." "Not now." Thomas's tone turned to ice. "If you interrupt me again, I'll have security escort you out. I want to hear from the people who are here every single day, not someone who visits once a quarter." Garrison fell silent. Thomas turned back to Riley. "Go ahead. Tell me why this envelope ended up in my meal bag, and why you all did this quietly, instead of going to management." Riley swallowed, glanced at her co-workers, then took a deep breath. "Because we did go to management. Once. But the person who needed help ended up losing hours, getting penalized for attendance, and moved to night shifts. Meanwhile, Milo needs urgent treatment. Every day that passes adds risk." She paused, then added gently, "And Hugo would never ask anyone for help. He's too proud. But we couldn't just stand by." Thomas looked around the room, silent nods, teary eyes, hands clasped tightly beneath crossed arms. He paused for a long moment, then said softly, "Then today, we're not going to talk about policy violations. We're going to talk about people, about a boy named Milo, and about why this system, this name, Fire Grill, forced you to do the right thing, in secret." The tiny break room fell into heavy silence. All eyes turned to Riley, the girl who had just cracked the wall of fear that had stood too long in this place. Thomas took the lone wooden chair and sat. His hand rested lightly on the envelope. His voice was quiet but firm. "Riley, I want you to tell me everything, step by step, from the beginning. Leave nothing out." Riley nodded. She looked to her co-workers as if asking permission, and received nods of solidarity in return. Caution had started to give way to something else, hope. Hugo started working here about 3 years ago. Night shift, washing dishes, draining grease, hauling trash, wiping down the back line after everyone else clocked out. Alone, she took a deeper breath. At first, we didn't know much about him. He kept to himself, always early, always working double, never complained, not even when the trash jammed or the dishwasher broke. There was one snowstorm, over 20 inches, and he was the only one who showed up. Another co-worker chimed in. He gave his last meal to a new intern once. Said he'd already eaten, but we all knew he hadn't had a bite all day. Riley nodded. Then one night, after our shift, I saw him sitting in his car in the lot, freezing cold. But he didn't turn on the engine, just hunched over, shoulders shaking. I thought it was personal stuff, didn't want to intrude. But when he left, I saw a child's car seat in the back and a medical supply bag. Thomas's eyes shifted from compassion to concern. A few days later, I overheard him on the phone in the bathroom, talking to the hospital about how insurance wouldn't cover the stem cell treatment, about postponing dialysis because he couldn't afford it. The room fell quiet. "Milo," Riley said, voice catching. "He's Hugo's son, 8 years old, born with severe bone marrow failure. If he doesn't get treatment, he won't survive the winter." An older woman named Angie, who worked in the storeroom, placed a hand on Riley's shoulder. They were scared. Who wouldn't be? Nobody teaches you what to do when you witness a father crumbling in silence. Riley wiped her eyes and continued. So we started gathering what we could. Whoever had tips left them. Whoever skipped meals chipped in. If friends came through the drive-through, we slipped the envelope into the meal and signaled they'd hold on to it until Hugo came in at closing. Thomas tilted his head. Why hide it in the food bag? Because managers don't inspect every order. And if we kept it in the break room, Garrison might go through it any time. This was the safest way and the most discreet. He looked toward the corner of the room, where Garrison stood frozen like a statue, face pale as paper. But Thomas didn't say a word to him, not now. "And were you the one who slipped the envelope into my bag today?" Thomas asked. Riley shook her head and glanced toward the young man standing partly hidden behind the water cooler. That was Owen. It was the first time he was trusted to handle it. "I was on grill duty today." Owen, a scrawny 19-year-old, bowed deeply. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. I didn't mean to. I thought you were Mr. Jim, the third regular of the day. He always orders a number 2, no onions, and a soda with no ice. I grabbed the wrong bag." Thomas gave a faint nod. No scolding, just a heavy sigh. "So you've all been secretly doing the right thing, risking your jobs for a child none of you have even met." Angie lifted her head. No, for a father too proud to ask for help, but who still manages to smile every single day. Owen added softly, "And because we all know what it feels like to be afraid of losing someone you can't save." That sentence silenced Thomas. He said nothing, but his heart clenched hard in his chest. No one in that room knew 26 years ago. He had stood in front of an ATM, withdrawing the last few bills in his account, praying it would be enough to keep his brother Michael alive. But back then, there were no co-workers hiding envelopes, no secret donations, just a letter of denial from the insurance company and a silent death in a public hospital room. Thomas rested his hand on the envelope, his fingers gently tracing the worn creases. "How long have you been doing this?" "Almost 2 months," Riley replied. "There's $406 in that envelope right now. The original goal was $900, enough for a small round of treatment. But Milo was just moved to urgent care. Now he needs over 40,000. 40,000, Garrison exploded. "And you people think you'll reach that by sneaking around. This is a business, not a charity." Thomas stood, slowly. His eyes locked onto Garrison, not with anger, but with a calm that carried more weight than shouting ever could. "You're right about one thing, Garrison. This is a business, but it's a business I built from a promise. That when I finally had enough power, I would never let a worker lose a loved one simply because they couldn't afford to save them." He turned to face the employees in the room. "And today, you, not the people in the corporate office, reminded me of that promise." Thomas lifted the envelope into the air. "From this moment forward, this is no longer a violation of policy. It's the beginning of something bigger. Bigger than any rule, bigger than Fire Grill." Garrison's face flushed red, as if someone had poured boiling water down his collar. He took a step forward, eyes frantic, still scrambling to understand the ground shifting beneath him. "Mr. Hale, He forced a smile, his voice oily with calculation. I understand this is emotional for you, but we have to stay rational. Company policies aren't meant to suppress kindness. They're designed to maintain order. If people start hiding money, starting secret funds, making unauthorized requests. Enough, Garrison. Thomas didn't shout. He spoke with a low, steady tone, but it sliced through the air like a knife, cutting off the excuses mid-build. The room went dead silent. No one dared breathe. Thomas stepped toward him. Each footfall echoed against the old tiles like the drum roll of truth being summoned. You're talking about order, about rules. He stared straight into Garrison's eyes. What kind of order allows you to scold a young employee for requesting 3 days off to care for her hospitalized mother? What rule forces a dishwasher to sign a waiver denying medical leave unless he works 30 consecutive days, even if his child is dying? Garrison took half a step back. I was just following policy. No. You interpreted policy in whatever way served you best and harmed the most vulnerable in the process. That's not leadership. Garrison, that's abuse of power. Thomas swept his hand toward the room, toward the worried, worn, but steadfast faces standing all around. They did what this system couldn't. They protected each other. They found a way to help a father and a child quietly, relentlessly, without a single complaint. Then he returned to the table and picked up the envelope again. And you? Where were you these past 2 months? Do you know the name of any employee's child on the night shift? Do you recognize anyone from the dish crew? Garrison opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Thomas nodded once, then pulled out his phone. One tap. A brief call. Jill, I need you to assign someone to temporarily oversee the Chicago region. Garrison is suspended immediately. He is not to access the system, personnel files, or internal accounts. Have security escort him out of the building within 15 minutes. Thank you. Garrison froze. He looked around, searching for sympathy, but none came. Everyone had seen enough, heard enough, and lost trust long ago. Thomas hung up and turned back to the room. No one here is getting written up today. No one is getting fired. And I'll make sure of that. My name is on the system. A breath of relief floated down from the ceiling like dust shaken loose. Riley covered her mouth. Owen nearly collapsed into his chair. But, Thomas said, his voice firm again, this doesn't mean we'll continue doing good in the shadows. I didn't build this company so that kindness would have to hide. He stepped to the center of the room, where no one leaned on the walls anymore. Every back was straight, every head lifted. I'm creating a fund, a real one, legally recognized, transparently managed, and fully funded. And it's going to start with the name of the person who reminded me of who we once were. Thomas laid his hand on the envelope. The Milo Fund. Because no child should be left behind. No worker should have to fall alone. Angie choked back tears. Owen blinked rapidly. Riley placed a hand on her chest, as if steadying a heart that had just burst wide open. But before we begin, Thomas continued, his voice softening, I need to meet Milo's father, Hugo. I want to hear from him in his own words. Riley nodded, eyes shimmering. He's scheduled for the night shift, around 4 p.m. But I'll call him. He doesn't have a smartphone, just an old flip phone, but he keeps it close. Thomas nodded. Good. I'll wait. Not as a CEO, but as someone who once lost a loved one, just because no one had the courage to break a stupid policy. He looked at the rest of the room, once a chamber of fear, now transforming into a place of hope. And today, because of you, that will never happen again. At exactly 3:58 p.m., the back door of Fire Grill creaked open. A figure stepped inside, quiet, unassuming, worn brown uniform, grease-stained shoes, and a canvas bag holding dish gloves and sanitizer. But something in his eyes narrowed with hesitation. The kitchen was unusually quiet. Everyone was looking at him. Hugo Riley called, walking toward him. You're here. Someone wants to speak with you. Hugo paused. He looked to be in his mid-30s, tall but thin, shoulders hunched from years of hard labor. His eyes misted as he saw the employees gathered in the break room, standing like an emergency meeting, and among them a stranger with a steady, penetrating gaze. Thomas Hale. Hello. Thomas stepped forward, extending a hand. I'm Thomas Hale, founder of Fire Grill. Hugo didn't take the hand. He clutched the strap of his bag tightly. In those sleepless, haunted eyes was one unmistakable emotion: panic. Sir, if this is about the extra meal I took last week, I didn't mean to. Thomas raised a hand, gently cutting him off. It's not about an extra meal. It's not about any mistake. I'm here because of something important about your son, about Milo. The moment that name left his lips, Hugo seemed to drain of color. The strap slipped from his fingers, bag hitting the tile floor. He looked around Riley, Owen, Angie, all watching him, not with judgment, not with pity, but with shared understanding. How do you know? Hugo's voice was barely above a whisper. Thomas didn't answer right away. He walked to the table, lifted the envelope, and held it out. This was in my lunch bag today. I don't believe it was meant for me. But now, it might be the most important thing I've received in years. Hugo looked at the envelope. His lips tightened. His hands trembled. Then he stepped back, shaking his head. No, you can't. I don't agree to this. They shouldn't have done that. If management finds out Garrison has been suspended, Thomas stated it clearly, without hesitation. No one here is facing punishment. I'll make sure of that. I'll speak directly with the board. Still, Hugo didn't fully believe it. He sank into a chair, hands gripping his head. You don't understand. I need this job, not just for the money for the insurance. If I lose the insurance, Milo won't be allowed back at the kidney center, not even for basic care. Thomas pulled up a chair and sat across from him, gaze softening. Not as a CEO, but as a father who once lost everything. I understand. More than you know, he said quietly. My brother Michael died at 17 from kidney failure. I was working 3 jobs. Then the doctor said there was a new treatment, $80,000, not covered by insurance. I begged, borrowed, prayed, but I lost him before I even scraped together 8,000. The room fell still. Riley covered her mouth. Hugo looked up, face twisted with disbelief and heartache. So when I saw your co-workers, people barely getting by, risking their jobs to help your son, I couldn't look away. Not as a CEO, but as someone who once failed to save his own family. Hugo bent forward. For the first time since entering the room, he cried. Not loud, not with sobs, just short, broken breaths and trembling shoulders. The tears of a father who had held everything inside for far too long. Thomas rose, walked over, and placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm going to help you, Hugo. We're going to help Milo, and not under the table, not in hiding, but openly, transparently, proudly. Riley came to his other side, placing her hand on his shoulder. Owen and Angie stood behind him in silent solidarity. And for the first time since receiving his son's diagnosis, Hugo nodded, not with resignation, but with trust. He stayed seated, fingers laced tightly together as if letting go would cause everything to vanish. His panic had subsided, but something still lingered, something that comes from years of keeping pain locked away. Thomas didn't press. He gently pulled his chair closer. Would you tell me about Milo, he asked, from the beginning? Anything you're willing to share. Hugo looked up. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, as if no one had ever asked him that before, or at least not with genuine care. Then he nodded slowly. Milo was born during the harshest winter night of 2015, he began. Back then, his mom and I were living in a studio apartment on the south side of Chicago, cracked walls, broken heater, but we thought love would be enough. He gave a soft laugh, a sorrowful one. He was underweight. The doctors said he needed monitoring, but we didn't have insurance. A few months later, Milo started getting tired easily, bruising all over. One day, he had a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, scared, but not crying. He's always been that way. Brave. Thomas said nothing. Every word that fell from Hugo's lips was like water seeping into dry earth, slow, deep, and impossible to undo. When Milo turned 3, his mother died. A car accident. She was on her way to pick up his medication. I didn't know how to tell a 3-year-old that his mum wasn't coming home. So I didn't. I just held him and told him she was somewhere far away, somewhere even the hospital lights couldn't reach. He paused, took a breath, and continued. I work 2 jobs, night shift cleaning offices and afternoon shift washing dishes here. Milo stays with his grandmother during the day, but she's getting weak, diabetic. It's really just me and him now. Hugo reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small photo, worn, folded at the edges, but clear. Milo, a pale, skinny boy with bright eyes, wearing a t-shirt with a rocket ship and holding up a toy shaped like a human cell. He loves science, especially anything about blood, cells, kidneys, probably because he's lived with it his whole life. One time, I asked him, "If you had one wish, what would it be?" He said, "I wish other people had pretty blood I could borrow once a week. No transplant needed. That'd be way easier." Riley's eyes welled up, her hand covering her mouth. "The last time I took him to the doctor," Hugo went on, his voice softer now, "they said if we don't find an alternative treatment, Milo's body won't make it to his 9th birthday. "And did they mention stem cell therapy?" Thomas asked. Hugo nodded. "They did. There's an experimental program at the University of Illinois Medical Center. The success rate isn't great yet, but it's better than waiting for a marrow donor. Insurance doesn't cover it because it's not FDA approved. The upfront cost is $42,000, not counting post-treatment monitoring. I've tried to borrow, even signed over a title loan on my old car parts business, but it's still not nearly enough." He lowered his head. His hands trembled. "And I can't ask anyone else. I'm scared. I've been turned down right in front of my son. That feeling. It's like having every shred of dignity ripped away in front of the one person you're supposed to be strongest for." No one spoke. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the sound of restrained breaths around the room. Thomas leaned back slightly. Then, from the inside pocket of his jacket, he pulled out an old, yellowing photo. "This is Michael, my brother. He died at 17 from kidney disease. We had a doctor once say the exact same words: if we don't get him special treatment, he won't make it through the summer. And we couldn't get it." Hugo looked at the photo, then back at him, no longer CEO and employee, just two men, two brothers, two stories of irreversible loss. "But this time, Hugo," Thomas said gently, "we're not letting tragedy win." He stood and turned to the room. "I'll cover the full cost of Milo's treatment, personally, not from the company. Milo will begin stem cell therapy before the end of this month." Hugo shot up. No, I can't accept that." Thomas turned back, placing a hand firmly on his shoulder. "It's not about you accepting. It's about Milo deserving it." It was dusk by the time Thomas left the break room and walked down the corridor toward the main kitchen. The cold hum of neon lights reflected off the peeling walls, casting shadows like he was walking between two worlds, one built by systems long calcified, and another just beginning to find its name. He paused in front of the shift schedule board. Most names were handwritten in ballpoint pen. Riley, Owen, Angie, Hugo. His name appeared nearly every night. Thomas stood there for a moment. This wasn't just dedication. This was the footprint of people holding up an entire system quietly, relentlessly, without recognition. He took out his phone and called Lisa Garvey, Fire Grill's head of HR. "Lisa," he said, voice clear, "I need you to arrange an emergency meeting with the entire executive board within the next 2 hours. I'll be calling in from branch 1 right here. And this time, I want everyone to look in the mirror." Lisa was silent for a beat. Then, "Understood. I'll make the arrangements." Thomas ended the call and returned to the break room. The team was still there, Riley handing Hugo a warm cup of tea. Owen sitting beside Angie in quiet solidarity. "I need you all to join this meeting," Thomas said, eyes scanning each of them, not as frontline workers, but as the voice of the spirit we've forgotten. They looked at him, some surprised, some hesitant. "Riley, I want you to walk them through how you coordinated everything to protect Milo." "Owen, you'll explain why you chose to break the rules. Angie, your experience will be essential." Then he turned to Hugo. "And you'll tell your story. About Milo. About what this system has never heard from a dishwasher before. For the first time." Hugo swallowed, still trembling, but nodded. "I'll speak." Thomas turned to Riley again. "You'll be my lead coordinator for this meeting. You've shown you can organize and guide. I've seen it today. Are you ready?" Riley's eyes widened. I'm just a line cook." "No, you're the first one who had the courage to speak the truth, and I believe you can inspire an entire company." Owen looked up, his eyes lit with purpose. "What are you planning, Mr.?" Hale Thomas smiled for the first time that entire afternoon. "We're going to change how this company works, starting with something the system has never done right, taking care of its own." He took a deep breath and declared, "I'm launching a fund. The Milo Fund will be officially operational next week, but it won't stop at Milo. Any Fire Grill employee, whether they mop floors or manage branches if their family faces a medical emergency, they'll be eligible for support from this fund." The room went silent. Then came the exhale, wide-eyed looks, a whispered, "Is this real?" from the back corner. Thomas continued, "I'll put in $1 million from my personal account to start it. Then I'll ask the company to allocate 1% of annual net profit to sustain it. And I want employee representatives from every region on the review panel for support applications." "You're really doing this?" Angie asked, her voice shaky from years of hearing promises that never came true. Thomas met her eyes that had seen too much disappointment. "I once lost someone because I hesitated. I'm not letting that happen again, not even once." Hugo put a hand over his face. Riley wiped her eyes. Owen turned to Thomas and asked, Could I help design the logo for the fund I studied, design for 2 years before I had to drop out?" Thomas paused for a moment, then nodded. "The first Fire Grill logo was designed by a sophomore student. I'd love to see your version." A breeze stirred through the doorway. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow across the envelope on the table like a symbol of something quietly, but certainly, about to change. The next morning, before the sun had even risen over the rooftops of West Chicago, Fire Grill Branch 1 was fully lit, not to serve customers, but to prepare for an unprecedented internal meeting. A meeting where those once dismissed as the lowest tier would now sit in the front row. Riley stood in front of a whiteboard set up in the main dining area, tables cleared to make room for a projector, webcam, microphones, and a few dozen plastic chairs in a semicircle. She held a clipboard, hair tied back, uniform neatly pressed. Nothing like the quiet girl behind the kitchen a few days ago. "Angie, did you check the HQ link connection?" "All set, Riley." It patched in from the central office at 6 this morning. "Owen, are the slides loaded? I added the Milo Fund logo in the bottom right corner. I used yellow Milo's favorite color." Riley nodded. In her voice, in her eyes, there was something new, not power, not temporary confidence, but a purpose that meant something. Thomas stood at a distance, paper coffee cup in hand, watching the team like he was seeing a rebirth of his own younger self 26 years ago, when he launched the first fire grill. No money, no backers, just a group of young workers who believed in him more than he believed in himself. Hugo had arrived, too, wearing a clean white shirt Riley had ironed for him, his hair combed, his eyes still tired, but no longer empty. He stood near the wall, clutching a photo of Milo, quietly proud as he watched Riley. Then the projector light clicked on, the webcam connected, and the screen lit up with the faces of the corporate leadership: CFO, head of HR, VP of operations, people who had only ever known Branch 1 as a number in a loss column. Thomas stepped forward, voice calm and steady. "Today we're not discussing KPIs or profit margins. Today we're telling a story, and I won't be the one telling it." He turned. "Riley, you have the floor." The room held its breath. Riley stepped forward, mic in hand. Her gaze was no longer one of seeking approval, but of giving it, on behalf of many. "We're the people often called the back end of Fire Grill, the ones in the kitchen, wiping tables, scrubbing dishes. But we're also the first to know when someone's not okay, when someone shows up to work with shaking hands after sleeping in their car, when someone has to rest against the wall after every shift because their child's getting worse." She turned slightly toward Hugo. He lowered his head, gripping the photo of Milo. "We don't need sweeping policies. We need a place where kindness doesn't have to hide. The Milo Fund is the first thing that's made us believe Fire Grill could be a place to live, not just survive." Then came Owen, sharing what it felt like to be handed the envelope for the first time, nervous, scared, but also proud to be doing something that felt truly good. Then Angie, who remembered a former co-worker who gave up cancer treatment because she had exceeded her 3-day leave limit, and why she never wanted that to happen again. Not to Hugo, not to anyone. On the screen, the corporate faces shifted. Gone were the analytical expressions, replaced by silence. A kind of stillness that only comes when something deeply human shatters your defenses. Thomas stepped up again to close. "You've just seen the real Fire Grill, not in data, but in the people who've kept the flame alive despite never being in the spotlight." He took a breath. "I don't need to convince the board. I only ask that you listen. And if any of you think the Milo Fund is just a PR campaign, then leave this meeting now, because we're not going back. No one left." Riley quietly returned to her seat, her hand gripping the corner of her clipboard. She had just stood for something larger than herself, and she'd done it with truth. Thomas looked at her and nodded gently. You've kept the fire burning when the system almost let it die. 1 week after the historic meeting, while echoes of Branch 1's presentation were still being discussed in boardrooms from Chicago to Los Angeles, something more important was happening, not in a conference room, but down a hospital corridor. Hugo stood before the door marked Pediatric Hematology, Stem Cell Therapy Consult Room. His hands trembled. He wore a freshly ironed white shirt, buttoned all the way up like armor. In his hands, a thick folder, Milo's medical history, blood test reports, rejected insurance claims, and a hope more fragile than the first light of winter. Beside him, Thomas stood silently. He didn't speak, but the weight of his hand resting on Hugo's shoulder said everything. You're not walking this alone anymore. The door opened. A young doctor in a crisp white coat appeared with a warm smile. Mr. Johnson, please, come in. The consultation lasted over an hour. Numbers were reviewed. New tests were ordered. And finally a sentence Hugo had never dared to dream of, based on the current results. Milo qualifies for the 3rd phase of the experimental stem cell treatment program, and the treatment costs have been fully covered by a newly registered entity called the Milo Fund. It was confirmed this morning. Hugo blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. I'm sorry, did you say covered? The doctor nodded, voice soft as a spring breeze. We've never seen approval go through this quickly. All initial expenses, including labs, cell infusion, and recovery, were uploaded into the hospital system just hours ago. Hugo turned to Thomas. His lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from something far more unfamiliar. Peace. Thomas laid a hand on his shoulder and said gently, We've made it part of the way. Now, it's Milo's turn to take the rest of the journey. That night, in room 206 of the pediatric ward, Milo lay on the hospital bed, his tiny hand wrapped with an IV, but his face beaming like he'd just been given an early birthday present. On the wall hung his newest drawing, a rocket ship with the words, Me and Dad going to the moon. Inside, Milo wore a spacesuit, and beside him, a smiling Hugo drawn simply, but clearly joyful. Are you the one who helped me get treatment? Milo asked when he saw Thomas enter the room. No, Thomas replied, sitting beside his bed. You helped all of us remember that miracles start with small dreams. Milo giggled. So, am I an inventor now? Thomas nodded. Starting tomorrow. And if you'd like, you can be the chief advisor for the Milo Fund too. Milo's eyes went wide. It's real. The fund is real. Hugo chimed in, his eyes still red. Not only real, but it has a logo designed by Mr. Owen himself. In yellow, just like your favorite color. The boy looked at the two men, his father, who had fought through every layer of despair, and the stranger who had stepped into their lives like a gust of wind carrying them back toward hope, and whispered, "I think my mom is smiling up there." Hugo gripped his son's hand. "I know she is." Across town, at Fire Grill headquarters, every branch received a new internal announcement. Starting next week, the Milo Fund will be implemented system-wide. All urgent medical requests will be fast-tracked. Bring your kindness to the right place. Let us take care of the rest. An internal map displayed branches signing up as official support hubs. Within 24 hours, over 150 locations had volunteered. No incentives, no corporate pressure. Just one quiet belief: if one little boy named Milo can change a company, then we all can start somewhere. 3 days after Milo's treatment began at the University of Illinois Medical Center, a short 42-second video surfaced on TikTok. The uploader, a middle-aged customer known as @NancyBakes, typically shared food reviews. In the clip, she opened a Fire Grill takeout bag from Branch 1. As she lifted out the burger box, she found a small card resting on top of the fries. It was a thank you note from the Milo Fund, printed on simple craft paper, with a handwritten message: "Thank you for being part of this miracle. Every meal, every cent, every kind look helps a child keep going." Nancy read the line aloud, then paused. In frame, she looked up and slowly turned her camera toward the counter, where a young staff member was clearing trays. It was Riley. "Folks," Nancy whispered to the camera, "I don't know what this story is, but I'm coming back here every week just because of the sincerity I felt in one little note." She gave Riley a nod. Riley looked up, slightly caught off guard, then smiled. A real smile. Within 24 hours, the video had racked up over 3 million views. The comment section overflowed with questions. What's the Milo Fund? Is Fire Grill actually doing something good? I want to donate. How is this just marketing or genuine kindness? If it's real, I'll eat here every week. The hashtag #MiloMiracle started trending across Instagram and TikTok. People who had lost loved ones to illness, single mums, restaurant workers from other states all began messaging Fire Grill's HQ, asking how to join. By day 4, Thomas received an email from the Director of Communications, Mr. Hale. The video about the Milo Fund is going viral. Local channel WCHI wants an interview. CNN has reached out about a feature called Corporations with a Conscience. We need next steps. Thomas replied with one line: "No interviews until Milo is out of the hospital. No spotlight. No turning a child into a prop. Let kindness lead." But the ripple effect was already in motion. Other branches began printing the same thank you cards as Branch 1. Some even added hand-drawn pictures from their own children as a way to give back. In Salt Lake City, a customer left a $50 bill with a note: "Because my son was once like Milo, I understand." In Miami, a student group launched a campaign called Grill for Good, pledging to dine at Fire Grill weekly and blog stories of everyday heroes. Back at HQ, the internal dashboard lit up with unexpected data. Employee turnover dropped by 34% in just 10 days. 5-star reviews on public platforms doubled. Quarterly revenue forecast exceeded expectations by 18%. And most importantly, over 700 employees voluntarily submitted proposals to support colleagues facing medical emergencies. In that week's executive meeting, Lisa, the longtime HR director, stood in the middle of the room, eyes misty. "Thomas, I've worked in HR for over 20 years. I've seen every kind of benefits program, but I've never seen one that spread from the bottom up, from the kitchen, from the fryer, from the hands that wash the dishes. We didn't push this, they created it." Thomas didn't say anything. He simply turned a framed photo on the wall, a picture of Milo in an astronaut helmet, standing in the kitchen at Branch 1, arm raised like he was reaching for the stars. And then he smiled. "We're not making a miracle," he said. "We're just finally getting out of its way." The following Monday morning, Thomas walked into Fire Grill Branch 1 in a simple suit. No tie. A peaceful look replacing the tension he'd worn weeks ago. The glass doors now gleamed. The old sign had been repainted. And beneath the words, "Fire Grill Number 1," hung a small bronze plaque, the place where kindness began. Inside, everything had changed, not just chairs or registers, but the way people looked at each other, spoke to one another. Riley was guiding a new hire through the online order system, her tone calm, confident, like a real leader. Angie, wearing a fresh apron, poured coffee while humming an old jazz tune. And Owen, the boy who once misplaced an envelope, was now standing at the pickup counter, handing out thank you cards with both hands and a proud smile. And in a quiet corner of the restaurant, Thomas saw something that moved him most, a wooden frame on the wall, displaying the original envelope, the crumpled paper, the $486 in small bills, and the handwritten note, "For Milo, don't tell the manager." Below it, a small brass plate read, "Where the miracle began." That Monday morning meeting happened right in the dining area. No microphones, no podium, just Thomas, standing among the employees in a circle. "Someone once asked me," he began, "how a fast food company can build a culture of compassion without collapsing under the cost. I think I found the answer. Start with one real person, one real situation, and don't skip a thing." He turned to Riley. "You once stood quietly in the kitchen. Today, I want to officially appoint you as Deputy Director of Employee Experience." The room burst into cheers. Riley stood stunned, gripping her clipboard until her knuckles turned white. "But I've never studied management. I've never led anything." "You've led everyone's trust, and that's something no class can teach." Thomas smiled. He continued, "Angie, I know you once considered retiring early because you felt unheard, but you've listened to others for over 15 years. Now I need you to help train frontline teams at 5 branches struggling with culture." Angie burst into tears. "No one's ever asked me anything except if I can stay late." Then Thomas turned toward Hugo, still sitting quietly in the back. The door opened. Milo sat upright in the hospital bed, cheeks pink, a soft fuzz of new hair growing in. One hand clutched a Lego rocket, the other waved wildly as if afraid Thomas wouldn't see him. "Did you bring the glove?" Milo shouted. Thomas held up the baseball glove. Not only brought it, but I got your favorite player, Tyrone Simmons, to sign it." Milo's eyes went wide. He gasped, then hugged the glove like a treasure. Hugo laughed and shook Thomas's hand. "We just got the latest test results," Hugo whispered. "His marrow is recovering. If there are no complications, he could be discharged by the end of the month." Thomas looked at Milo, a weight lifting from his chest. "That's amazing. Then we'll need to plan a big party." Milo grinned. "But I want it at the same place. At Fire Grill, with Miss Riley, Mr. Owen, and the sign with my name." Thomas nodded. "You picked the right place. That's not just where you got help. It's where you helped everyone else remember who they are." On the day Milo was discharged, no one expected more than 200 employees from neighboring areas to show up at Branch 1 to welcome him. The small street outside the restaurant had been swept clean and decorated with yellow balloons, Milo's favorite color. Riley wore a new apron embroidered with Deputy Director of Culture, darting between tables and sound checks. Owen wore a badge that read "In-House Designer," with Fire Grill's new logo, a heart nested within a flame. And Milo, wearing a white coat with the Milo Fund logo, stepped out of the car with Hugo, waving to the crowd like a little commander. Thomas stood among them, no mic, just his steady voice. "Today, we're not just celebrating Milo coming home. We're celebrating something bigger that we didn't turn away when one small life needed to be held up." He looked around the once weary staff standing tall, customers who had abandoned this branch now returning with friends, lost eyes now lit with purpose. "Some say corporate culture only exists in boardrooms," he continued, "but I say it begins with a paper bag, an envelope tucked into napkins, and a girl in the kitchen who dared to speak the truth." He raised a new wooden plaque, engraved with Riley's first words, "When someone can't voice their pain, be the one who asks the right question." The applause was thunderous and unending. That night, in his office at headquarters, Thomas sat alone. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo. Michael, his brother, smiling in a hospital gown, flashing a peace sign with tired, dark-rimmed eyes. Thomas set the photo next to a handwritten letter from Milo. "Dear Mr. Hale, when I grow up, if you're still running Fire Grill, can I be a manager? I want to help people like you helped me and Dad. P.S. I'm really good at math." Thomas smiled, eyes shining. The dream of a child had saved the soul of a company. And maybe it had saved the last part of himself he thought was lost to numbers, reports, and boardroom silence.